That's James's deck dinner for today. It's one of the nasturtium flowers from my garden. It's a jewel mix. That's the first type to bloom of the 3 types I tried growing this year. Arugula, pomegranate arils, black beans, garlic toast, and potatoes with chimichurri sauce. And he's having some tiramisu cake with strawberries. And I'm having a piece of this chili and coriander naan, which is awesome, instead of garlic toast. So that's my meal. It's a little bit different. And I'm going to be talking about Spell, which got the top of the stack rating from me. And In a Valley of Violence, The Deal, and Adverse. And I brought this garlic bread bag out just to so that I made sure I mentioned that. I like to give some tips about how I cook things or whatever, even when I'm not making anything really fancy. And what I do is I save these bags of garlic bread. So I don't actually like eating the garlic bread. James prefers it. He likes with the tomatoes sliced on and whatever. But I like saving the bags. So I love that he likes eating the garlic bread because I can cook whatever in it. So the bigger garlic bread bags, I put a whole salmon in there and just tighten it up at the end. And that can go on the grill or in the oven, and it works great. That's the best salmon that I cook, is when it's in one of those garlic bread bags. It works way better than regular tinfoil or whatever. And today I made these little yellow flesh potatoes. I just dumped a bunch that I'd washed inside put them in the garlic bread bag and stuck them on the grill, and they worked out really well. So you can cook all sorts of things in those garlic bread bags. So it's if somebody in your household loves eating garlic bread, well, it's great, because then you have the bag to work with. So, Spell. It was way better than I thought it would be. It's about a man he's come from the backwoods sort of thing, but he ran away from home a long time ago because his father was abusive, and he ended up being a very successful person in the city. And he's wealthy, he has a plane, and he has a beautiful wife and 2 beautiful children who are teenagers. And he gets news that his dad has died and he has to go handle the estate or whatever. So he's going back to the backcountry, and it's a scary thing for him. You know, it's a culture shock and whatever, but he had, this is what he'd grown up with, so he actually understands it, and his father had taught him well. And I don't want to spoil the story or anything. It's different than I thought it would be. The man I didn't mention, he's an African American man who moved. He became a big shot in the city. And the backwoods people that he's dealing with, they're all African American people too. They're just a different culture. And I love the movie. It was very different, very scary, and if you like horror movies, you'll love this movie. And if you're okay with seeing a little bit of things that are going to make you, then you'll still love this movie. It was a great movie. Top of the stack, definitely worthy of the top of the stack. It was great. I really enjoyed it. In a Valley of Violence. This one has Ethan Hawke and John Travolta, and it was a pretty good Western. I mean, you have the whole dog aspect. Anyone's going to go along with that, right? So I don't want to give everything away, but yeah, don't mess with a man's dog.
Oh, yeah, okay.
The Deal. I had never known that Meg Ryan and William H. Macy worked on a project together, and they worked really well together. Meg Ryan looked really beautiful in this movie. I remember telling somebody that one of my loved ones, oh, she looks like Meg Ryan. And
I know who you're talking about.
and the person that I was saying that to, he was like, well, Meg Ryan. And I'm like, Meg Ryan? Like, why wouldn't you? I don't know. I mean, sometimes she doesn't take great pictures, but come on, you know? Meg Ryan's beautiful. And the person that I was talking about, she looks like Meg Ryan. She's beautiful.
I know who you're talking about. I always
Exactly.
thought Meg Ryan was one of the best looking Hollywood stars.
Yeah.
And
She looks
one of
naturally
the,
beautiful.
well,
unlike a
until
lot of
she
people.
got the duck lips for
I
a
know.
while.
Well,
Has she gotten rid of them
people
now?
go into that. Well, this is an old movie, so
Okay,
I can't
there
say,
we
but
go.
she looks very beautiful in this.
I don't know why. She kind of
What does it
had
say?
thin lips, but
2007. So not that
fat
old,
lips,
I
I
don't
don't know. They're overrated, and the duck lips looked awful.
Yeah, a lot of people went in for that, and I
Like
don't
even
know why.
Cher went in for that.
Boy, oh
What was
boy.
that about?
No, you don't get my food. I'm taking my food over here.
Okay.
So anyway, yeah, I tend not to like movies that are about movie people, but it was okay, and honestly it wouldn't have been a movie without William H. Macy and Meg Ryan. They worked really well together, and they're both great actors as far as I'm concerned.
She's a pretty good actor, too.
She is,
You
yeah.
know? Yeah.
Adverse. This one had Lou Diamond Phillips and Mickey Rourke in it, and some other folks that I didn't know. But honestly, it seemed to take forever. I guess I should tell you, it's a movie about a sort of a guy goes after the people who killed one of his loved ones, and so he's out for revenge. So if you're into out for revenge kind of movies, maybe. But honestly, this was not Mickey Rourke or Lou Diamond Phillips' best work. And the movie seemed long, and I couldn't tell you how long it was. I was just glad when it finally ended. So it definitely deserved the bottom of the stack rating.
It's from way back when Mickey Rourke had a semblance of looks, or...
No,
Oh my God, is that him there?
it is.
Oh, Mickey.
2021. So anyway, I think that's what it says on the back.
Yeah.
My eyesight isn't great. I've needed new glasses for a long time. But anyway, we hike. That's what we spend our money on. And it's great. It's money well spent. I just have to hold things certain distances and work on it. And I'm not driving right now, so whatever.
I had to laugh when I checked in and saw you watching this, because I thought it was something from the 50s.
Oh yeah,
A
they
Western.
did a good job.
They're so rare nowadays. And of course, when you get literary critics and other type of critics, especially from Europe, aside from Birth of a Nation, the archetypal American movie is a Western. Westerns went the way of the dinosaur, I hope, in the 70s. You had the occasional one, but it would be kind of like a, revisionist or whatever. The white cowboys were bad guys or whatever. Am I making it up? Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Have you ever seen that movie? It was from, I think, 1970. Raindrops kept falling on their head and all that sort of stuff. And then there was one, wasn't the Last Picture Show. Anyway, from the mid-70s, Altman. There's one about Buffalo Bill. I think it starred Paul Newman. I thought Newman did a pretty good job in that. So when you've got nowadays people saying in Canada, wow, one of our cowboys was a black guy, John Ware or Fred Ware or something like that. I was hearing about this guy in the 60s, as I recall, when I was taking social studies in grade 7. But they kind of exhumed him and stuff like that. He helped build our nation. Now, hold on. The revisionist history is cowboys were bad guys. And yet, they've revived old 50s trope and stuff like that for the one black guy who was... Now, they're going around saying, a quarter or a third of all the cowboys in the United States were black. Are you saying there were that many bad black people? You know, cowboys were there to kind of solidify taking the land from the indigenous people out west. I don't think of them as being good guys. But, you know, like, truth never really bothered literary critics and their ilk. The Frankfurt School and all this sort of stuff, so-called philosophers, Herbert Marcuse, Adorno, Theodore's maybe how his name is called nowadays, Max Horkheimer, their ilk. About the only one of their ilk, who's part of the Frankfurt School, that I have any truck with is, it's not Max Horkheimer. I'm let you on the name. Who cares? He's really not that important. He's a Marxist who actually believes in something like democracy, maybe, and humanism, but God never forgot. What's his name? I don't remember. I mentioned. So, eventually, Pauline brought a comic for me. She didn't buy it. They were giving it away at the library. Musqua, defender of natural law. And I'll show you the cover. But you'd think he'd be dressed in more buckskins than Neil Young in his heyday back with Buffalo Springfield. He had fringes like they were dragging on the ground practically. I don't know if he was wearing moccasins. Neil Young, not Musqua, defender of natural law. It's hilarious. He's got a sidekick. It's a woman. She appears to be. I just woke up. Appears to be indigenous. And then way trailing them is a sidekick to the sidekick, and he's very white. He's kind of fair-haired and looking really wimpy because Musqua's out front and sidekick's way back. You know, like, hey, coast clear, Musqua, and. You know, I don't know what he's going to be inside. I'm waiting for the thing to, as I call it, cook. So in case there's COVID crawling all over it, it doesn't kill me for this low-class experience. Yeah, you just know he's got to be an anthropologist with a deep concern for deep ecology, maybe. Or
well, I've flipped through the comic,
so what
and
is
the artwork looks great.
The artwork's awesome. But maybe they can't draw buckskin with fringes and all this sort of stuff and moccasins, because Musqua up front. Now, what is the woman is wearing a hoodie, and I don't think the Cree, even the Plains Cree, had hoodies back in the day, right? And the anthropologist or whatever he is, he's got a little bear's paw.
Well, it must be about now then. It must be based on now times.
Yeah, if you defend natural law, you're not walking around wearing stuff that's... Take, for example, what Musqua is wearing. As I recall, he's wearing jeans. Now, I think jeans were invented by a guy called Levi Strauss, hence Levi's, right? And where was he doing his inventing? Well, his name is, he sounds as though he's a Jewish kind of fellow, Levi. Strauss is a German name. Now, I associate that name with a guy from Alsace-Lorraine, or as the Germans call it more correctly, Alsace-Lothringen. Probably mispronouncing it seriously, but apologies to German folks. And Alsatians, or German Shepherds, come from that area. It's now owned, not very legitimately, by the French. So it's the borderlands between Germany and France, and the central kind of area border. So when was it invented? It was invented, I think, in San Francisco area, and it was during or a little bit after the California gold rush, so after 1849. So that's a little bit after contact. Like I expect Musqueam, defender of natural law, to be wearing stuff that fits in with the environment at contact. Contact would be initially Christopher Columbus and the mainland, what we think of as the mainland of North America would be after 1600. Well, not contact, but when the settler colonialists started moving in. And so Musqueam is wearing a sports shirt with a number on it. Now, maybe the folks who invented lacrosse, which we're told is indigenous people, and I believe it, maybe they had big, colorful numbers on them, like stuff like that. You'd think, if he's going to wear something like that, at least looks like maybe the Chicago Blackhawks, maybe with a cross tomahawks on the shoulder or something like that. But no, it looks like a basketball shirt. So basketball, it was invented in the New World and by a Canadian apparently called James Naismith. It was maybe at Amherst or something like that in the United States and Massachusetts.
Well, I think you should read the comic before you review it.
I'm just reviewing the cover. So the cover is an insult to anyone's intelligence looking at it. He's wearing jeans and he's wearing some sort of sports shirt. It looks like a basketball shirt. And
well, he is holding a spear.
Yeah, and it looks as though it might have a Clovis
so it doesn't really make sense for modern times.
Well, it's all schmozzle. Like how are you going to defend natural law? The indigenous people tried it. Now they had bows and arrows by the time of contact, but the spear, looks as though it was brought over, invented in the New World maybe 10,000 years ago. It's not nearly as it's not even an atlatl. And then he's engaged. It looks as though he is a turkey trying to stand off whoever is trying to mess around with natural law, and maybe a raven, or hopefully it's a raven and not a crow, because a crow is just going to flee and be loyal to whatever, loyal to itself. Anyway, the cover is stunningly ridiculous. If I find out it's been funded by the government of Canada or the government of Alberta, or
of course it has.
Of course it has. You checked, or
no?
When I say if I find out, it's like when.
What's wrong with that?
They should do a better job of having something that natural law means. You don't have the guy's wearing runners. The woman is wearing some sort of fancy stuff. They're not wearing moccasins. It's the cover is stupid. Maybe it'll be hugely intelligent and all that sort of stuff on the inside, but it's an insult to the taxpayers' intelligence, really. Anyway, let's talk about more insults to the intelligent. So I've kind of picked stuff from all over the political spectrum. We've been talking about it before. Hunter S. Thompson. So this is garbage to come out of the 60s. Charlie Manson, or garbage ideas. Hunter S. Thompson was actually a pretty good writer. But you could see in his last days, he was just a shell of himself because he abused drugs. And of course, one of the things he abused as much as anything was a drug that a lot of people don't think of as a drug, alcohol. One of the things that didn't so much come out of the 60s, but really was emphasized and still getting hammered on today is the idea. Here's a pseudoscientist, and he's a sociologist, as I recall. So I call a pseudo anti-social scientist. Why I am not a scientist, and he's proud. Why? Oh, because he doesn't believe in rationality. And these literary critics always go back. They're following their continental forebears and not so much peers, because the continental peers of the literary critics at all tend to be first among equals. So I can recall looking at something that was like literary criticism / philosophy. I was going, wow, it's put out in the United States, and the vast majority there are more French philosophers, thinkers, whatever, represented. It was an anthology. Than there were of Americans, British and Canadians and Australians combined. And there were more German so-called thinkers than there were Americans, English, Canadians, and Australians and New Zealandese, or whatever they're called, combined. And one of the kind of like founding principles for this kind of thinking is Descartes got us off on the wrong foot. And when's Descartes? It was, let's say, maybe around 1650. René Descartes. Now, I'm semi-impressed with René Descartes. He seems to be a great mathematician. It looks as though he was the guy that came up with the idea that you get a x and a y axis. You end up with a plane, and you can actually associate equations with figures on that plane. Ooh, that's good. And he did have a few things to say about empirical science, but from what I can tell, he was into deductive science. And deductive science is mathematics where it's nothing. Science is not deductive. Now, if you want to go with a scientist who actually seem to operate on deductive principles, at least in printed form, let's deal with Isaac Newton. We don't go with Descartes and start dismissing science because he's the guy who you literary critics think founded modern day science. So Newton kind of looks as though he put his stuff together, Principia Mathematica. His Principia Mathematica would be Russell and Alfred North Whitehead. I believe Whitehead worked with Russell in that. So it's more the foundations of mathematics and logic. But, Newton seemed to have based the way he put this stuff together on the way Euclid put his stuff together. And guess what? Euclid's a mathematician. And it's impressive. I think it's called, what it's called is elements. Euclid might have been like 300 BC, a long time ago. So, there are scientists, especially folks who are into the quantum theory sludge and all that sort of stuff, and relativity, who want to make a grand unified theory and presumably make it deductive. Deductive logic is antithetical, you got that, to science. And there have been all sorts of thinkers in the English/American tradition who like to think about science as being empirical, i.e. based on inductive logic. And the only mathematics that should be involved in inductive logic is the branch of something like mathematics called statistics. And statistics are not nearly as fancy and highfalutin as as things like topology and even analysis. You can use calculus. You can use calculus for science and that sort of stuff. And he's the guy who devised calculus for some of the stuff that he was doing. But it had better be at the service of inductive logic, empirical science. So all these stupid idiots are going around dismissing science as being based on reason, rationality, all these literary critics and stuff like that. This is where that kind of thinking gets you. Is this a reductio ad absurdum, a argumentum ad Hitlerum, only maybe someone who's in some ways almost worse than Hitler? Because Hitler was actually able to kind of function in society, whereas Charlie had some problems. But no, every time you get to this kind of stuff, it ends up being in a reductio ad absurdum. Every time. Is that an ad hominem? I don't think so. You know, the commies, when they find, now of course they portray themselves as being scientific. Yeah, what did Marx have to say about Marxism or communism? How much time?
About 2-3 minutes.
Okay. He called it scientific socialism. But you know, the German Democratic Republic was East Germany. It was, I don't know if it was that German. It was basically, Russian proxy. It was a republic. Respublica is what a republic is. It's the thing of the people. It wasn't about the people. It was about the intelligentsia. Intellectuals. And democratic. Do I have to say anything? Yeah, I suspect I have to. Because there are all sorts of idiots going around there. They're kind of like neo-Marxists, or they don't call themselves commies that much. But I ran across one kid about 5 years ago who was saying Stalin never killed anyone. And he called himself a commie. So this is where the nuttiness, well, you can disagree, I don't care, you're wrong. This is where it might not lead as directly to this sort of stuff. So you got these stupid sheep who followed this pig here, Charlie Manson. And that's where it ends up. And then, as a reaction to the 60s, you get G. Gordon Liddy. And he was a skunk too, a crazy skunk. We'll talk about why he ended up being so problematic, why he'd make such bad decisions. Maybe I'll mention it now, Like I was trying to figure it out. Why? Because he claims, at least in his book, that he got a PhD, presumably in something like law. Why was he so stupid? His dad insisted that though Dude didn't want to do it, be a catcher. And Dude talks about getting hit in the head. It'd probably be foul tips he talks about, as well as what he talks about, which is getting, a guy takes a swing, the bat comes around and bonks the catcher right in the, right in the front. Was that the temporal lobe and stuff like that? So, and of course, all the excesses of the 60s, this guy hung around with the Ken Kesey, the guy who wrote One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and talk about cuckoo.
You mean the prefrontal cortex?
Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
And Ken Kesey was hanging with the Hells Angels.